I looked up how to quit my job, how to retire early, and I came across the FIRE movement, Financial Independence Retire Early movement. Came into this whole new world of people aggressively saving, investing, being optimal with their finances in order to leave the corporate world to do what they wanted. Those tangible goals can only exist and be sustainable with the intangible things that we need to work on. That's our mindset and our habits. When you feel devalued for your skin color and you don't feel like people see you as equal, there's a way that you want to show that you belong. Showing that you belong sometimes looks like, I can buy that, I can drive that nice car too. Nothing necessarily wrong with wanting the nice thing. It's like knowing why you're doing it. You want to buy that self-worth so other people can see it. The wealth that I talk about, that's invisible wealth. No one can see you have that fully funded emergency fund, you maxed out your 401k, or that you started to invest. But they can see kind of the car you drive or how you look. With that, I think the focus really becomes, what do you want from your life?
Hello, Throppers, and welcome back to another On Deck with Throp episode. And if this is your first time visiting, a special welcome to you. My name is Winthrop Wellington, and here on my podcast, we have meaningful conversations all about Jamaica. And today I have a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about a subject that I love talking about, finance. And she is an author, a podcaster, an entrepreneur, a runner, and also is doing some really, really cool things in the personal finance space. And she is a fellow Jamaican that moved abroad when she was young. And we're going to get into all of that in today's episode. And it is my pleasure to welcome Jamila Souffrant to the pod. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. It was very interesting doing research on you. I think there's like a lot of similarities to myself and you with your passion with finance. And then also now you are officially a half marathoner, which is huge congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So to start with, you are a personal finance expert and a lot of people look up to you. And of course, I think it's many people's goal to eventually achieve financial freedom. And so I'd like to know, like, how did you get into this space originally?
So I would say I got into this almost accidentally, but also just because I wanted to be free of my corporate job. Mm-hmm. And it goes back, I'm sure we're going to get into my story of coming to the US and all that. But for me, my desire to become better at my personal finance was from this idea, this reality of my long commute. So I was working in New Jersey, living in Brooklyn, and I was so limited on my time. I had a very demanding career. I was starting a family, and this was all in my early 30s. But even in my 20s, I knew that I wanted like a different life. I just didn't know what that life would be or could be without a job. And, you know, everyone worked, especially coming from a Jamaican culture. You know, you work until you can't work anymore. That's what you do. And so I didn't understand or know there was another way of life. And it was until that I had this commute, I was juggling, pregnant for the first time with my son, figured, no, this can't be my life. Like, I cannot spend an hour and a half commuting to work, staying at work for how many hours and commuting back and then raising kids. And because I wanted to be free of that, I started to look into personal finance. I looked up how to quit my job, how to retire early, didn't know what those things really meant at the time. And I came across the FIRE movement, which stands for the Financial Independence Retire Early movement. And with that, I came into this whole new world of people aggressively saving, investing, being optimal with their finances in order to leave the corporate world and traditional work structure early to do what they wanted. And because of that, that's when I started to get more into personal finance and changing our finances as a family to then do what I'm doing now.
Awesome. And I guess through your experience and doing it for yourself, you wanted to share it with others.
Yeah, so I think that's the interesting thing about personal finance. Everyone's journey is going to be different. Their starting points are going to be different. But I remember being in the car, started listening to podcasts about the FIRE movement, people's stories about reaching freedom, achieving all these things, and then started to apply it to my finances. And then as I started to do those changes, make those changes, have a budget, invest more aggressively get my husband on board where we were both now investing, I started to realize, wait a second, I'm listening, I'm learning from these people, from the podcast, I'm reading blogs. They're just like me, but I feel like there's something missing. There's a voice missing in the space. So at the time, it was really dominated by just a lot of like white men, which for me, I can listen and learn from anyone. But I just knew like there was another segment, other people that would want to hear this said in a different way. And I started to create my own journey publicly. I started to share that. And so I started Journey to Launch as a blog first. So I said, okay, I'm going to retire and quit my corporate job in 7 years. I made that declaration publicly because I was like, if I say it publicly, then I'll have to do it. And then I started to share what I was learning, share what I was doing with my finances. I created the podcast about a year later in 2017 and Journey to Launch podcast. And from there, I started to have on guest experts. I started to get deeper in just learning about personal finance to be able to teach it or talk about it with others. And it launched me into this whole new career and pathway that I didn't even know was an option for me, and allowed me to leave my job earlier than I thought and achieve this level of freedom that I have without necessarily reaching complete financial independence, but getting very close. And so distilling that information of how I changed my life, transformed it in a way, is what I'm now doing and helping other people do, because I realize that there's so many people who don't even know it's possible, or they want someone, who they can relate to, looks like them, or at least talks with them, not at them. Yeah. And so that's what I've been doing, is like sharing relatable personal finance and financial independence topics to who I call journeyers. So I heard you say throppers, which I love. I love naming your community because it really is a community. And they're just, people just like you and I who want something else or want to see themselves doing something else. And so it's beautiful when we can like have these platforms to do that. And so I say how I teach it is by living it and by showing it and being just relatable and down to earth with it.
Awesome. And speaking of journeyers and being on a journey, you have an interesting origin story and journey. And I mentioned in the introduction that you were born here in Jamaica.
Yes.
And I'd like you to go into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I was born in Jamaica. I would like to say not the borough, but the real true island of Jamaica. And I was born in Montego Bay. So my mom had me when she was pretty young. So she got pregnant at 19, had me at 20 years old. And my father, he was around, but he wasn't really active. And so her father was able to get her papers for her. And at the time didn't know I existed. He was also not that active in her life, but at least he got her papers to come to the US. And when he came to tell her, hey, your papers came through, she was holding me, and he was like, oh, who's this baby? I didn't have papers for her. So you have to make this decision to actually leave her. So you can stay with your daughter. And that time I was just born, or you can leave here. I have an aunt, you have a cousin in the States that you can live with. And so she had to make a difficult choice to leave me. And I think it's a choice a lot of people make, especially having to leave family members behind. But she left me behind at a very young age, came to New York, and kind of, made it happen for herself. As a young single mom, she used to work at, Burger King, all the places where she had to just earn money. And she knew education was going to be the exit point out of poverty. And so she got her education in the States. Ended up getting her master's degree, but was able to bring me over. So I kind of skipped ahead, but she was able to bring me up to meet with her again. And we reunited at 2 years old, just under 2. And with that, they used to call me her little pocketbook because we went everywhere together. And she was for being so young, and now that I have 3 kids, she was I'm just amazed she was able to do as much as she did and was so focused in raising me and pouring everything she had into me without it being necessarily about money, but just love, support, some of the things that she honestly didn't have and knew she wanted to do differently. And with that, I always say that's the reason why I was able to succeed, or I'm so confident and take risk today, is because of what she did. And she kind of trailblazed that path. And so her, I think, origin story and her bravery and doing what she did, I think laid the groundwork for everything that I'm doing now, because it would not be possible without her.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And, you hear stories like this, and sometimes they're bad. This is in terms of like there is no support for as a child, and whereas your mother went in a very different route, different path, and clearly you got a lot of your work ethic and your approach to what you do and how you do it from your mother. I'm sure through just observation, right? And the idea is that I think our parents is like to set you up to do better than that they did. And I think that is like an important lesson that I think our parents, maybe they don't even know that they're teaching us this just through observation. Yeah. And it's incredible to hear.
Yeah, I mean, she truly, and I think that it's very interesting now talking about personal finance and investing in oneself. And because I get a lot of questions about, oh, how do I, if people have children or they want to raise them a certain way and to give them opportunities. And I say like the tangible things are necessary if you can do it. But I think what's even more important is the intangibles and the things you pour into your children, even without the money, is to raise like the confidence in them, to that support, that love, without it being a crutch though, because you can kind of do it to the point where then they're not ambitious and or self-sustaining children. But I just think it's so important, and I know we're going to talk a bit about kind of that inner work that we have to do, but I just find from my experience, not growing up with a lot, but the necessary things, that's what really impacted and helped me get to the trajectory I was on and that I am on.
And then growing up, like you said, you were born here, left here at 2 years old. What was your relationship like with Jamaica?
Yeah, so the great thing about my family and about my mom and even my father's family is that my father was not active in my life. And even though that was the case, my mom had a good relationship with his family. So I was able to come down to Jamaica almost every summer. I remember actually traveling. I was like an unaccompanied minor for a lot of those trips.
Yeah, I remember those kids.
Like being 7 and 8, right? You had that, and you always had like the flight attendant that looked after you. And my grandfather worked at the airport, so he'd like meet me at the airport. So I had my two families, or my mom's family that I would stay with, and I had cousins over there. So I'd stay for a few weeks with my mom's side, and then I would stay for a few weeks with my dad's side. And so they fully embraced me, my dad's side of the family. He was a Rastafarian, so he had, not to make the generalization, but he had a lot of kids. And so I had a lot of siblings here. But the good thing about that too is like they all knew each other and they all accepted me also. So when I come to Jamaica, that's when I got to know them. And I was like the sister that was like, lived abroad, and they thought like probably was rich and I was not. But it was a very, I have such nice memories of coming down to Jamaica every summer.
Awesome.
And it was out of necessity for my mom. It was cheaper for her to do that than send me to camp in New York. So she sent me down. And so with that, even though, my family who, Jamaicans that live here, like they make fun of me, like they call me, I'm Jamaican, is that I truly do feel like home when I do come, because of growing up here and having those memories, climbing, get up trees and all the, hearing all the stories and having those, like, without the generation of iPads, right? Before all that, like I was just playing outside with my cousins, learned to ride my bike in Jamaica. So all those memories really just make me love this island even more.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you were telling me a little bit about your father off camera, and it seems like he was extremely impactful in the Rastafarian community, but just in general, Jamaica.
Yes. So I've always, he passed away, he's since passed away, but his name was Isa J. Junior Manning. And apparently he was very influential in the community and a lot of things that I'm doing now. Apparently he did, in terms of, he was a speaker, he was a writer, he was on the radio, and championed a lot for the Rastafarians in terms of just getting reparations for what happened at Carroll Gardens, was on a lot of boards, apparently tried to like help legalize marijuana. Like he was leading a lot of charges within the community. And so I kind of knew that, but I was young, like knowing that. And then also because he wasn't active, also really didn't really care to look into or make that kind of connection with him while he was here. And again, like I said, I think the beautiful thing about the relationship that I did have with him and my siblings is that we knew each other. Like he knew when I would come to Jamaica, and he did try to see me, but he wasn't as active as I think someone of his kind of impact and stature would want to be with his own children. And so that always kind of perplexed me. But as I got older, I kind of understand it now. Not that it made it okay for him not to be as active, but there's a part of me that thinks that maybe he needed to be that father figure to the community. And not that he couldn't do it with his own kids, but if anything, I think I had a lot of love from my mom, like enough to go around. And so there's like a whole thing I kind of want to explore with that, with my father's side and my father's family. But I think just knowing that about him helps create that connection of who, I am. And I want to explore that a bit more.
I see. And sticking with your Jamaican side, or your Jamaicanness, I should say, do you speak patois?
No, don't even. You're not going to ask me to try and speak right now, are you? It's very. I think I sound okay, but everyone laughs when I do it. So I was told not to try. When I come here, my sisters say don't speak, or they're going to charge you double. Just be quiet.
It's a running joke on my platform as well, like that I don't speak patois, but it's for the very same reasons.
Yeah.
It's people laugh at me, and like I just get, I don't know, extremely insecure when I start talking. I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna do it.
Right. So I'll do, if I'm having fun, like I'll say things, but like
same. That's exactly the same here. And like people are like, I mean, you've been here 18 years and you have no accent. I think it's also just being from New York. Like it's hard to go. It's not gonna go away, my New York accent. No matter what.
Right.
So that's okay. Good. At least I have somebody who can relate.
I thought you were gonna put me on the spot.
No. I would never do that, because they try to get me to. They put me on the spot all the time with it. So I wouldn't. So now I want to get a little bit into the finance aspect of it, like what I was really looking forward to. Love talking about finance and all aspects of it. And there's so much going on in the world of finance, in the world of investing, real estate, and I feel like Bitcoin, like it's just such an interesting time to be alive and kind of be in that echo chamber, so to speak. And with the personal finance aspect of things, people, and I feel like, especially like during the pandemic, people were looking for ways to kind of get out the matrix, so to speak, and join movements like the FIRE movement and figure out, hey, if person A can do it, maybe I can do it. Maybe that's a possibility for me to go along this path and kind of get out of the rat race, so to speak. And you yourself have done that. And I think a lot of it comes down to, I know what we were talking about off camera, is just like the mindset, right? And having the presence of mind of understanding in a realistic way, like where you are and how you fit into this world, whatever that world may be for you. And then, once you got it, you're like, okay, how do I get out of it? And so where I'd like to start is really with the mindset part of things, and get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so when it comes to money, personal finance, the idea is that you want enough money to be able to like live your life, pay for your expenses, the discretionary expenses, and the mandatory expenses, right? And then also be able to have money left over to invest, save, do all the other things.
Yeah.
So I call those the tangible things we need to do. You need to earn money. You need to then spend money in a way and hopefully have money left over to reach goals, whether that is fun goals like vacation or buying a nice car, or investing in responsible goals. And so those tangible goals, I believe, can only exist and be sustainable with the intangible things that we need to work on. So that's our mindset and our habits. So things that are not so easily measurable, even though you can measure habits a bit, but it's the things that most people, it's hard to work on. It's hard to get to because you just want to get to the money. You just want to earn more. You want to maybe save more. You just want to see some results that you can measure. And I think when it comes to the mindset and habits piece, that first you have to believe it's possible. And, so sometimes starting there for people, it's just like, I just need to get to action. But you won't take action or sustain the action without believing first that it is possible for you, that it is possible for you to earn more, to make it out of poverty, to maybe see and I'm not talking necessarily about discretionary, nice kind of fancy stuff, but just if you see a house and, someone living in a house and you want now to buy something for yourself, to think like that could be me one day. So having that mindset, that growth mindset, that I can do that too, I can figure things out, I think it's like the starting point for everything, and not just like money, but just life, right? Yeah. As you know, as someone who's successful in a lot of things, like first you have to think that it's possible for you and have to want to try it, even if you are at the risk of failure. Because failure, if you have a growth mindset, doesn't mean you failed. It just means it didn't work this time. Mm-hmm. And so I just find that when it comes to finances, and I think about my life and even my mom. So sometimes when I think about like our stories, I think I started from a place of much more privilege than she did, growing up in poverty in Jamaica, having me so young as a single mom. But she had a strong mindset to be able to come to the US and figure things out before the internet age and work hard to put me in a better position. And then when I think about kind of that baton she passed me, I know that I maybe had some things that were like helpful to me, like having my citizenship, having a mom that allowed me to live with her while I worked in my first jobs and was able to save money. So those are things that tangibly helped me. But the mindset piece of me thinking to save money and invest instead of buying things at first, when I first got my real job and I was able to buy my first condo, are all the things that helped me get the tangible. Mm-hmm. So I think starting there for a lot of people is boring and can take a lot of deep work, but it's the most important place to work on to reach the tangibles.
Right. And I also look at this as a bit of a double-edged sword, in the sense that, as I said earlier, like you see person A and you're like, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too. But then we're also living in this world where people are maybe in a misinformed way influenced or inspired by things that they might see on social media, right? And they may see this thing that they want to achieve, but they may not really see that like it's not what it seems, one, or maybe they are trying to be, maybe that's probably like the main thing. And so my question is like, how do you see in your world the social media influence people that follow you and clients or whatever have you, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, because there's a lot of people faking it and scamming mm-hmm. on social media. And not like, there's some people who are purposely scamming and like doing it to get over. And there are some people who want to have something better and just present that. And it's not, I don't think they're maliciously trying to trick people, but it's just not a congruent life to what they're showing versus living. Mm-hmm. And I think it just runs rampant in especially anything with money and personal finance, because you can quickly go down the route of get quick rich or get rich quick schemes, mm-hmm. because building true wealth, it's a process, it's a journey, it's not overnight. And with that, I think a lot of things come into play in terms of our culture and our starting point, especially for like our communities who are already starting behind in some cases, and feel like they have a lot of room to make up. And so when I talk about like the slow, boring way to get to wealth, like investing long term and doing like the right things first, that's not as exciting mm-hmm. as, well, like let me I could show like the cars or certain things that would get people like interested, but to me, like that's not sustainable, or that's not the going to ultimately benefit you. But I think the hook for a lot of people is like to show that stuff to get people excited, because that's what people do like to see. Mm-hmm. And there's just a lot of steps being skipped. Right. Unfortunately.
And so like it's such a hard thing to overcome, right? Especially in the position that you find yourself, because specifically in America, I think you're fighting that instant gratification, that get rich quick, right? And then you're also fighting, in my opinion, like this innate willingness to put yourself in debt to achieve whatever that thing is that you see the other person have, whether it's a car or a luxury vacation. And people are just so willing to just throw it on the card, and but I get to put these cool pictures and videos on Instagram. How do you break past that with, and again, going back to that mindset with people?
I think it's important to be introduced and to see other things. So I think some people naturally like those things. Like I'm not someone who naturally, I think, likes certain luxury things. So I'd rather spend my money something else. But some people like cars, and so I don't want to make people feel bad if they like nice things. I think it's understanding why you like the nice things. And so again, going back to just a lot of it is deep rooted and psychological. First of all, these companies, they know exactly how to market to us and make us feel like we need this item. And then, there's like a lot of studies, I talk about this in the book, just like the fact when you feel devalued as like a person or for your skin color, and you don't feel like people see you as equal, you want to prove, and this is not for everyone, but there's a way that you want to show that you belong.
Wow.
And showing that you belong sometimes looks like, I can buy that, I can drive that nice car too, I can wear this too. And again, nothing necessarily wrong with wanting the nice thing. It's like knowing why you're doing it. Like for the acceptance, for someone to look at you and say, oh, they're worth it. Like you want to buy that self-worth so other people can see it. And I think the wealth that I talk about, or, when it comes to investing and having an emergency fund and being able just to pay your bills without going into debt, like that's invisible wealth. Like no one can see that, maybe you have that fully funded emergency fund, or that you maxed out your 401k this year, or that you started to invest, even if it's not a lot, but they can see kind of the car you drive or how you look. And so I don't think, I'm not blaming or faulting people for starting there, because it is like the thing that people see. And, in this world, like how you look does help you get ahead and how you present yourself. But also so you asked about like how to help change that. And I think the introduction to other people doing it that way. So before I knew about the FIRE movement, I knew about investing. I was putting a little bit of money to my 401k to get the company match, but I wasn't maxing it out. I was one of those people like, I'll get my money now and figure out 50-year-old or 60-year-old Jamila can figure it out then. And then when I started to listen to the podcast and read books and heard about people investing like half their income, or saving like aggressively and like foregoing the vacation for a couple of years to do these things and to quit their job, like I was immersed and learned about a new way of life. And it didn't mean that, and for the first couple of years I was very aggressive with investing and saving, but it at least allowed me to get introduced to something different. And so then when I'd see like the comparison, it's like I could still dabble in, like, I still spend money. And my journey has changed a lot since I first started my journey to financial freedom. But I think just being introduced to something else and seeing other people do it, where that's a normal thing, where it's like, yeah, I maxed out, or yeah, I'm investing in index funds, like the boring index funds, like not going straight to crypto or anything, like this is what I just do, helps people realize, okay, that's something that is like a thing, that's like something I could do potentially. And seeing someone do it even more than you, where you feel like, oh, I can at least do a little bit of that, is helpful. So I think just being exposure is like really big, but then having the mindset to realize you're being exposed to it is important, to realize that you can also do it too.
And I think that's so interesting that you broke that down, right? Is that, like you said, like in our community, like being flashy and showing off certain elements of material, it's supposed to elevate you somehow, but like you went into like the psychology of it. It's just like there's something deeper going on there.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I never really heard that before, but that makes complete sense. And so it's like, how do you open people's mind to realize and recognize?
And again, there's nothing wrong with like wanting a nice car, staying in a nice place. But what happens is we want to do that before like the basics and the foundation, and then you do that first, and it continues to put you in a deeper hole you cannot get out of. And yet that's, I think, where we kind of mess up. And if you want to get ahead and really get ahead and like have that wealth, not just for your generations like after you, but for now, I think you have to do it in order.
Yeah, because and it really is perpetuated by social media these days, and you realize like that is what you're spending money on is so silly because you don't have these non-sexy things checked off on the financial stability list, right?
Right. But so when I think about exposure, it's about, I started to follow in my journey in the beginning, like all the, the personal finance accounts. And again, you have to be careful because it's the type, right? Is this the kind of account that's shown like, the flashy things to buy, which again, you can like stuff like that and still follow those people. Or is it like the accounts or people talking about paying off debt and saving money? So immersing yourself in that world, there's so many like debt-free community, like the hashtag and all this stuff where you will start seeing like people having goals, not just for buying a car or vacations, but like getting out of debt or even paying off a mortgage, but not necessarily is something everyone wants to do quicker than the average like rate. But, just immersing yourself or being introduced to other worlds where people are doing things that are just, you didn't consider doing before. And now you're interested in it and want to learn more.
No, great way to kind of wrap that up, so to speak, like in a nutshell. Because I think back to my dad too, and I remember I was 12 years old, and I remember my friend, let's call him Andy, white boy. I grew up on Long Island, so it very mixed, diverse, and good friend of mine. And he's like, I just got a credit card. And so I go home and I tell my dad, like, I want to get a credit card. Andy got a credit card. I want a credit card. He's like, why do you need a credit card? And then just went into this thing about like, if you can't buy it, you can't afford it. If you can't pay for it in cash, you can't afford it. And, dad, immigrant family in America, it's like saving like that. And so that's always stuck in my head. I actually hated it growing up because we weren't poor, we weren't rich, we were middle income, right? For the most part. But it was never about our clothes, even though I wanted the Jordans just like the cool kids. But like I never had Jordans as a kid growing up. Just couldn't afford it, or my dad didn't see it as something that was important or worth it. And so it was tough growing up as a kid and in being that way, but looking back, I very much appreciate it now because I am not one that kind of falls into that mix, so to speak. But then when I think of America, and it's just kind of the secondary point I was making earlier, like debt seems to be a way of life in like every facet. And it's just, like you said, there's different communities that focus on, hey, let's get debt free. But I feel like a large majority of America is just like, hey, Jim Brown is in $100,000 in debt. I guess that's okay for me to be in debt. And that's just when I think of America, like I think of debt and being in debt.
Yeah. I think there's some statistic that says, what the average American owes in debt. Like most people are in debt, and then you think about it, for some of our biggest accomplishments and ways to get further ahead is you need debt to do it for sometimes. Yeah. So whether that's education, and if you don't need to get debt to get a college degree, you don't do it. But for a lot of people, you need it to get some student loans,
right? Or
buying a home. A lot of people cannot buy a home outright. So like debt to get ahead is useful in certain scenarios if it is affordable debt or debt you can actually maintain and pay off even if before like the scheduled rate. And then everything else though, like the credit cards, the car loans, sometimes I talk about in like my content that there are levels to this. There are levels to using certain tools to help you get ahead. And debt can be a tool depending on your level and your comfort in using debt. So, for example, I'll just go through like these 5 stages because I thought when I came up with them, it was useful for me because when I thought about financial independence, which I don't think I explained or kind of gave the definition because it can mean different things to different people, but it's this concept that you don't have to work ever again or actively because your investments pay for your lifestyle, your investments or passive income, if there is such a thing, right? Passive income, but you have to work kind of hard to set it up, pays for your expenses. So that's what the FIRE movement is kind of about, that you're able to reach financial independence where your investments pay for your lifestyle and you can retire early. But oftentimes it's more retire and do what you want because most people still kind of work actually, but they do whatever they want. And so when I first heard that concept, it sounded to me just like you said, like, where do I sign up? Like, who doesn't want just do whatever they want without worrying about money because their investments are just paying for it. And so that's a big goal, right? And there's a lot of steps to get there because then you got to invest and you got to have money to invest. And so I broke out the journey to financial independence, that top goal, to five stages. And so the first stage is what I call the explorer stage. That's where you're just trying to get to be able to pay for your bills without going into debt. So without using the credit card, you can pay for your living expenses. And so there's a lot of people in that stage that they cannot do that without going into debt, right? Then stage 2 is what I call the cadet stage, where you're working on getting out of consumer debt. So that's like credit cards, anything high interest of loans. I typically don't include a mortgage or a student loan in that category just because so many people have it and it could be huge and take forever to pay off. But any other high interest rate debt you would include in that kind of second stage of you're working to pay off. The third level is what I call the aviator stage. That's when you paid off your consumer debt and now you're investing as aggressively or not as you want to get to whatever goals you want. Then the fourth stage is what I call the commander stage. That's the stage I'm in. That's where you're work flexible. So it's not that you never have to work again, but you can be flexible with your work and choose what you want to do. It's not just dependent on the paycheck anymore. You could take time off if you want to raise a family, maybe travel the world, do something different. And then that final stage is like you reach financial independence. You don't have to work if you don't want to. And so when it comes to debt, right, depending on where you are on those stages, like you can use debt or not. So like in my case, I do use debt. I use my credit card all the time to get points. You know, I find it useful for me. If I wanted to maybe start a business or do something else, maybe I would weigh the pros and cons and see how that, but I feel like I'm in a position to be able to take on and do certain things and risk. And a lot of people can, but there are a lot of people who cannot. And they're like in the beginning stages and are using debt to fund their lifestyle. So they can't pay for their living expenses. So things have to go on the credit card, or they rather buy that discretionary thing, has to go on the credit card. And so like the beginning stages are where I think if you're using debt, you'll get stuck there and stay there longer and you won't be able to progress. But if you're like kind of like further along and you're using debt sustainably or in a way that works because you're kind of gaming interest rates in the system, like that's different. But so many people, again, skip steps and don't understand the difference. And I'm not talking about people who actually need debt to like survive, because there are some people who don't make a living wage to do certain things. So that's like a bigger issue that like we can't solve on the podcast. But I just want to mention that because I do know that there are just some people who do need that, and it's more like society and like there needs to be governmental changes.
Yeah.
But again, there are some people where it's like you don't need to, like you can like put the credit card down. Like that's not something you need. Let's go back and like work on these stages and these things first before you do that.
And I know everybody is in different stages of their journey through those 5 stages that you mentioned. But in general, what kind of focus, what level of focus do you need to really make this happen, would you say?
Complete financial independence?
Yeah, to get to 5. So
that's stage 5. So here's the thing. I believe everyone can get to stage 4, the work flexibility stage. I think everyone can get to that stage. I do think the complete financial independence part can be a little harder depending on someone's starting point. You know, whether it's when you started to get serious about your finances or your income, right, or your expenses. I think my journey, so I'm married with 3 kids, live in New York City. Our journey is going to look different. It has looked different. So 2-income household for maybe a single person who has kids or doesn't have kids, right? Like that's going to look different. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about focus, I think it all comes down to understanding like what you want out of life. Mm-hmm. And it's like this balance of being really bold and daring. I call it a moon goal, this financial independence goal. Like it's big, but I think you should shoot for the moon goal so that you can end up way better than where you're starting, like they're in the stars, as they say. And with that, I think the focus really becomes, what do you want from your life? And so you may start the journey. I say this is a journey everyone should take just because there's no way that you can fail at it. Like, so let's just say you're thinking, all right, this sounds good. Let me like try to figure out what this means and how much I need to be financially independent and how long it's going to take. Let's say you did the calculations. There's like quick calculations. You can like figure out how much you need. And it's like, dang, I need to like have, I don't know, $2 million invested in 15 years in order to give me a return that like helps me live. But let's just say you start the journey and in 15 years you only have 300,000 because and all your efforts or whatever happened. But if you didn't start the journey, you would have had maybe nothing because you wouldn't have tried anything.
Right.
And so I just like to like kind of tell people like, yes, there's going to need to be changes made, but they don't necessarily have to be full of deprivation and an unhealthy journey, but it will put you in a better position. So again, like the focus and what it takes is all going to be different depending on your starting point and your goals. But I do think it is something that level 4 is everyone can get to if they do certain things differently, change the mindset and work on these things.
I see. And would you be okay with sharing some elements of what your commander level looks like for you?
Yeah, sure. I think, okay, so when I think it'd be helpful to maybe go back and to share how I've changed in the way I'm handling like my financial journey. Mm-hmm. So when I first heard about financial independence, I was like, okay, I want to do this because there's different ways. Like the more money you need to live, the more expenses you have, like the higher your number needs to be. And so when I was working full time, I thought, okay, I think the quickest way so I can quit my job because I didn't want to do this for a long time would be to like decrease our expenses and save and invest as aggressively as possible for the next 7 years. That was my goal. Like in 7 years, I'm going to be able to reach our version of financial independence. And then we did that for a couple of years. We were aggressively saving and investing. But throughout those years, I got pregnant with my third child. And I knew that like I did not want it to take another 4 or 5 years to reach this complete level of independence. And I didn't want to be as frugal in order to do that. Mm-hmm. And so we changed our strategy a bit as Journey to Launch started to take off in a way. Not that it was making a lot of money, but it was gaining more popularity or people were really getting the message. I thought, well, what if this was a vehicle for me to do in the meantime while I am on the journey to financial independence? So, I could do this as my career and make money doing this instead of my corporate job, and I could have more flexibility. Mm-hmm. So I was able to quit my job a lot earlier than that 7-year mark because of like starting the journey. And that kind of put me into this commander level where work is flexible. So if we changed our lifestyle, we could be completely financially independent, but we don't want to. We're at the stage where our kids are pretty young and we enjoy doing things and we want to have these experiences with them. And so for me, what that looks like is choosing when I work, having enough money that I need to take a break or the business doesn't make money, like that's okay. We can still function. There are some privileges here. I have a husband that still works. So there's like a baseline of income coming into the household. And that's why I say like everyone's situation is going to be different. Gotcha. So for me, though, I think it's interesting because I do think everyone's journey does change along the path. Like you may start out thinking one thing, just like 5-10 years ago, you probably thought something or had goals for yourself and they probably have changed, right? And so I think that's the beauty of the journey is that you'll be surprised how quickly things can change for you, no matter even how like bleak you feel like your starting point is, because all the things that you need to do to, let's say, go in and ask for that raise or look for another job that earns you more money or learn how to invest and open up your first Roth IRA, like all those things like accumulate and compound over time to help you in ways you don't even see the pathways yet that will put you in somewhere else that you can envision. And so that's why I think for me, my current journey, I almost feel like I'm living the life of like the financially independent life I want without all the money. Of course, there are other things I would do if I had like all the money in the world or enough. But like the time, I think, is what like we didn't talk about yet. I think most people just want autonomy and control over their time and energy.
Right.
It's like the money, obviously, you need to be able to do that and so you can live the life you want. But when I think about like how I'm able to spend my days and like how I can be here in Jamaica doing this interview with you, like it's because the money helps, obviously. It's set up that foundation. But what I really want is the time and energy that I have to do what I want. And I think that's like,
that to me is like
most people
everything.
Are doing it. Yeah.
That's everything.
Yeah.
Because like even if you have a job that's you're making $1 million a year, but you're working 60-hour weeks and you're getting 2 weeks vacation a year, it's like, what's the point?
Right.
What's the point?
And you got to know your enough point. So it's not, I think having it all, like what is having it all?
There you go. Yeah.
And for some people it is worth to work extra for the car, for the nicer place, for the vacation. It might be worth it. And there's no judgment on that. And for some people it's like, that's actually my enough point is a lot lower than that. Like I actually don't need the most expensive kind of like thing or the top line. Like I'm good middle, like that midline level. I also have like a term for it in the book. I call it guac levels.
Guac levels?
Yeah,
Okay.
I call it guacamole levels because that's how much I love guacamole. And they go from 1 to 5. Can you tell like I like stages and like compartmentalizing things? And so like guac level 1 is you would never order guacamole out at a restaurant. Like you would never do that. You'd go home and make it yourself. And it goes to 5. So guac level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is like the most expensive, most elaborate. You have like a guac factory or like someone who like a chef making guac for you at home. And then 3 is like midline. You know, when you go out to eat, you order the guac, you don't really maybe care about the price of it. And so I think we all kind of have like different things we like and want to spend on in our lives, and understanding what that is. Like you don't have to be a guac level 4 or 5 in everything, but there might be some things like you don't play about, right? Like, okay, I want this to be nice, and other things like I don't have to do. And so knowing what that is for yourself and then allowing it to change depending on the season of life you're in is important. So the season of life that we're in, we're tending to spend more on like our kids' activities and trips and vacations versus when we were in our 20s and just like, you know, it's just us. Like we were like budget vacations. Like my friend and I, we were like 6 in a room, like trying to save money. It was different.
Right.
And so knowing the enough point for people, I think is really important because that's and it kind of goes back to what we're talking about with seeing social media and what other people are doing and not being swayed by that, but like having your own focal point of what makes me happy. What can I live with or live without so that I can reach this level of freedom?
I also think like what you just said, like recognizing the season that you're in is so important. I think a lot, and I'm guilty of this very much so, of I sometimes don't even recognize the season that I'm in, at least in the past. And it's only until like years and years later, I realized like, man, I was going through it, you know, and I was in this season of my life. But I think with your platform and what you're doing, it's like helping to open people's eyes up to that, because it's like once you recognize like, oh, this is a season, and that it also creates a motivation and it gives you something additional to work towards and know like, hey, I want to make it to the next season, and it just looks so much better.
Yeah, I mean, I think about when I was in my 20s or even starting Journeys to Launch, I hustled so much more. Like, you know, I was trying to meet everyone. I was like, even when I worked in corporate America and I wanted to move up the ladder, I was doing all the meetings, kind of showing up a certain way. Like I was going for it, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like this part of my life is definitely, I don't want to say as ambitious, but recognizing, because sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves when we don't realize the season of life we're in. And for me, having like small children, like it's a lot of energy that it requires to raise them and to care for them. And I mean, it's enjoyable, but it's hard. And so I don't have like the energy that I had before kids or when they were even younger. I don't have that right now to do certain things. So no, I don't want to like travel all over the world to do certain things, even for my like company or, you know, business. It's just too much because of the season of life I'm in. Yeah. But maybe, you know, as I get older, or I feel differently, maybe it will change and I'll want to take over the world again. But so I just think understanding that about yourself is so important. Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really powerful. And like even going back to your guac scale, when I was in, I was gonna say my 20s, but even before that, as a kid growing up, like when I used to walk through the city with my mom, or through Brooklyn with my mom, and they had like outdoor seating and dining, and we couldn't afford to do that. And I used to just like look at all these people. I'm like, how do they afford to go out to eat? Because we never did. I mean, probably a handful of times per year we'd go out to a restaurant, and it was a big deal for us. So as I got into my 20s, I was poor, broke college kid, and then eventually poor, broke recent college grad. And then even when I did go out, it was still a big thing, and like I could only get an entree, right? But then eventually I could order an appetizer. And then like when I was like in my 30s, then I was finally in a position where I could go out to eat anytime for the most part, and I can go to a restaurant and not worry about it. And now I feel like very free to do that and not bat an eye. And it's simple as that is, you know, some people are like, oh, that's it. You can go to a restaurant. Like that's all you care about. Like, but yeah, that means a lot to me to be able to do that. And I think it's like such a privilege. And I don't mean to like, put anybody down when I say something like that. But I think like to get to that position for me to be able to go to a restaurant and take my dad out or my mom or whoever, and just to have and break bread with each other and not be this like financial burden is like really incredible for me.
But and I can tell like that matters to you a lot based on also your personal like experience, right? Like you have that connection, you remember that. And so like it's like you said, like it's like an honor, it's a privilege to be able, you recognize like that's a value for you that you're willing to spend on now. And I think if we probably all think back to whether it's our childhood or just growing up and even how we think about money and spend money today, like it can probably go back into something deeper. And I think if we sit with it, that no judgment even, like if you find like, wow, like I've been doing this for this reason, but to just be aware of it, I think is an interesting thing. I think awareness is the first step. Like it's still, again, starting within and then understanding or recognizing and being real about if there are changes you want to make. Maybe you like, I always tell people you can take an inventory of your life and your finances. And so like, let's just say you're in a job or you're doing something you do not like. And, you know that the steps, I think, personal finance, it's not all of it is online. Okay. You can Google how to budget, like all this stuff. No, like I haven't invented the wheel on talking about like money. Hopefully I'm saying in a way that makes people interested in a way maybe they didn't think before, but all of this is already there. Right. Like, and so I think understanding or knowing that about yourself, like why you're not doing certain things or like what that thing you care about is, like why maybe you haven't earned more money, like is there a blocking point? Is there, are you afraid to like speak up or advocate for yourself? Is there just this thing that you just enjoy doing and you're not willing to give it up? Like be honest with yourself on that. You might not be ready to change. Some people, I know if maybe that saying when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Like there's so many times I remember kind of understanding or knowing about investing in retirement accounts in my 20s, but I was not ready to hear and do all of those things. But there's a point in my life where I was so unhappy with my job, my commute, that I said, oh, I'm ready now. I'm ready to make a change. And so I think a lot of people, like they think they're ready to change, but they might not be ready to yet. And so, but at least being aware of that so that okay, if I'm complaining about this job or my life or the debt or something, and now here are these tools to fix it. Like, do you really want to use the tools? Like, and if you don't want to use them, maybe you're not ready. But be honest with yourself. Like, it's not always maybe someone else is like doing it to you. It might just be a lot of us create our own kind of just prisons in a way and handcuffs to like these things we're just comfortable doing.
Yeah.
And just being honest with, okay, you know what, I do like the car. And I guess I have to work longer to pay for it, then that's what it is, right? Like, unless you're willing to change that, then that's fine.
No, in a big way, like it keeps coming back to the mindset. And even like as you were talking, like asking for more money and like thinking about how things that happened in your life previously is affecting things now. Like you're triggering like so many things in my mind, and maybe some of it we talk about off camera, but like definitely very, very, very powerful stuff. Let's see. So you have brought up your husband a few times. And I think, I was going to say for young people, but I think just people in relationships in general, how important is it to have the right partner, for lack of a better term?
I think it's everything, unfortunately. But it's a big, I think, who you end up with, who you have kids with, like matters so much. And I think you don't have to be the same type of person, have the same intensity in things, like not everyone, like I am into our personal finances. He is into, but he's not in the way I am.
I see.
There's some people where it's like, they're in it together. Like he's trust me enough to like come to him and we make decisions together, like major decisions, but he's just like, I trust that like you kind of got this. Not everyone's like that, right? Some people would be more upset if their partner wasn't like doing everything the way they wanted it to be done. But I think ultimately you should be careful, especially for younger people who have not tied themselves down yet. I think it's important just to be careful and to choose people. I always say, when you're looking at a life partner or dating, it's like, of course, like all the physical, again, all the like tangible things are important, but like what about the intangible things that necessarily can't be measured but matter? And so for me, growing up the way I grew up without like a father who was reliable or around, I knew that I wanted to have like, of course I cared about everything else, but for me, the most important things was I wanted someone who was reliable, that I thought would like their word, like when they said they were going to do something, they did it. And even like we met pretty young at 19 in college, like even as a young man himself, like I could tell he had a lot of integrity. Right. And I dated other people, so I knew the difference, like, like what that looked like. And so to me, those were like intangibles I was not willing to budge on. And that I knew I was going to look for in a life partner. And that integrity goes into like all the other areas, whether it comes to money, like talking like finances, being a father. Like to me, like that was like the most important. That helps us now like be a team when it comes to raising like, 3 kids and being together so long. So yeah, I would say, it's very important if you're young to really, and not even just young, even if you're older, right? Like to be just thoughtful and, in picking a partner, not just for the physical or like the tangible stuff. What are the intangibles that you feel and like can be shown, not told, like, that you see they do, and that can be, like, the person's like heart or spirit.
And from like a finance perspective, and everybody's different situation, different things that they look for in their partners, but are there red flags that you recommend that people look out for, whether it's a male or female dating in a potential life partner?
I think so. I don't think you have to like go and just first date, let's talk about credit scores and how much you make. But I do think at some point it's important to have those conversations to know where each other are on the journey, and how they handle money. That, are you combining finances at some point? If you are going to be further down the line, are they even open to that? I think their history is important. Like maybe like how were they raised and how was money talked about in their families, and not that they're gonna, if it was in a negative way, repeat the same cycle, but just understanding like their background and like is important. So I think if someone's not open to having money conversations, or automatically thinks maybe that you're after their money, and that can be a thing too, right? For people who find themselves to be successful, but like being just open about talking about goals, like what are your aspirations, like kind of not necessarily going to the numbers, like you could find that out without actually getting to the numbers first, but finding out like what do you want out of life, like what are you currently doing, like, and thinking more about working together. I think I always like joke with my friends now. I think I think it's harder it seems like for younger people, because like everything's social media, like, you're seeing like this lifestyle and like a way it should be. And I just think most couples, even in my relationship or people I know, like it's not like that. Like in the real world, like it's working differently. So to also not like base it based on like a facade or something that's not real, but like what's going to work for you and that person. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I know partners that keep their finances separate, right? And it works for them. And that's just what they do. And I know that there are people, including like my husband and myself, we just combine everything. But there has to be a trust level, an openness there that you can talk about those things. So I think if someone doesn't want to talk about that and it's kind of off the table, then that would be a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And, especially like in, I was going to talk about our community, but like to start with, like when you look at marriages and the divorce rate now of marriages, which is like over 50%. And I forget the exact percentage, but like a large percentage of marriages, one of the main reasons that they end in divorce is because of finances and not having those conversations. But then we are also, and I think this applies to Jamaica as well, but even in America, especially in our community, is many of the women in the relationships, they are the breadwinners, and you're seeing a lot of women be very, very successful. Same here in Jamaica in a big way. Like there's so much women leadership in corporate Jamaica, in entrepreneurship. And I think that is also can be difficult for some men to accept. I'm totally okay with that. I've dated women who have made way more money than me, and I'm totally fine with that. But it's at the same time, I think it goes back to what you're saying of like the openness to have the conversation about finances.
Right. Like there needs to like just that respect level, because both people have to be reasonable. I think people, right? Okay. Like let's start
Fair enough.
there.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, so let's just say someone is like as a woman making more money, and I don't think she has to dim her light, right, to do that. Right. But just because you're making more, you don't then act like maybe if there was a man making more, like in that way where now you're not just the boss just because you make more either. Right. Like there's a way that you can reason and respectfully like talk to your partner. And like, I think money is important. And it's so funny because there's so many, like, especially the relationship podcasts. I don't know if you like see all the clips and about like money and like who needs to pay for everything and making more. But there's so much of those conversations. And it's just like, there is a way for two people to come together, whether, you're not at the same level. I forgot who it was. It was this actress that said she would never like date a bus driver. It was something. And it was like a big thing. And they were like, well, that's why she's still single. I'm like, well, if she doesn't want to date then maybe it's not necessarily about the income, but just the lifestyle. Because if she's living a certain lifestyle, maybe that just doesn't work. But there's some probably actresses that are dating more like, people who are like have just regular jobs. It's just, that's her choice. So I think understanding the kind of person you are, and then like the person that you want to date, if they're also like on the same page, it doesn't mean you're like literally on the same page, whether it's financially, but I think more just like maturity wise and communication wise, same page where you're open is the starting point. Not necessarily like you don't have to have the same experiences, the same way you handle money. That can all be worked out.
Yeah.
If you're reasonable people that like want to work it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Reasonable people.
Yeah, you got to be reasonable.
I do want to hop into a little bit more tangible aspects of personal finance, and just a general open question of like, where do you start with people, especially like somebody who wants to start investing? And we talked a little bit about like Roth IRAs and things of that nature. They want to get to that level where they're earning, their money is making money for them, so to speak.
Yeah. So I think first, I always tell people to do an inventory of their finances. So the tangible things like how much you make, and you'd be surprised. Some people don't know, like they know their check comes in, but like there's no, especially if you are a contract worker or entrepreneur, it can fluctuate. But how much do you make? So do an inventory, like what's your income? And then what are your expenses? I think that's like one of the hardest things for people to do because it can be very unwieldy and you don't actually want to know because it's like embarrassing or just like, you're spending on things that are keeping you kind of stuck in a way. But knowing your income, knowing your expenses, meaning how much comes into the household, how much is leaving. And then your assets, so how much you own, and that can be in the form of whatever that's real estate or your savings account, checking account, and any investments. So retirement accounts and non-retirement accounts. And then debt. What do you own? So what things do you owe? What are the liabilities? So income, your expenses, your assets and liabilities. I think you should know those numbers. That sometimes can be quick or take a while, but it's sitting down and doing that inventory. And then from there, you can come up with a plan on the next steps. So you might do that income and expenses and see finally, like, I'm in the red every month. Like, no wonder why my checking account keeps going down, or I got to like pull out the credit card to pay for something because I'm literally spending more than that's coming in. Because that's really like the formula really is income minus expenses equals. So I call it the wealth formula in the book, but it's your income minus your mandatory expenses. So the things you need to live. So rent, mortgage, equals hopefully some money left over. Mm-hmm. And I call it the gap. With that money is from which you now can you can pay for discretionary expenses. So all the fun things we like to do, going out to eat. Then it also needs to pay for your goals. So what financial goals do you have? And then, or investing goals that you have ultimately, and then paying down debt. So your income is where it really all starts. And depending on how much you spend, it allows you to either get ahead quicker in those goals than others. And income is the driving force. So I think if you're sitting down and you now have this like in your face, you know the numbers, you can see what needs to be done. Because maybe you see that and you're like, wow, I really don't earn enough for the lifestyle that I want to live or that is reasonable. And like, I'm not even talking about guac level 5 lifestyle. I'm talking about like just like I want to live a decent guac level 3, 2, and I need to earn more money to do that. Then creating a plan to earn more. And what does that look like? And sometimes that can take a while, right? Because it's, maybe it's searching for a new job. Maybe it's now you got to advocate for yourself at work, and that might take some months. And then also looking at your expenses. So how do you optimize them, right? Are you spending in areas that don't matter to you, that are out of convenience? So are there habits that are actually impacting how much you're spending? Because I know for me, food is a big expense. And a lot of it now is just convenience. Like, it's just easier to sometimes to pick something up. And so if we were more thoughtful and did things in advance, we'd save a lot more money. I think a lot of people probably have that going on for them. So seeing that is going to be helpful. And then also now when we look at the other side of the equation, like kind of in that gap area that I talked about, it is, okay, you want to invest, you want to pay down debt, you want to save for the vacation or house that you want to buy. How much money do you have left over to do that? How do you increase that gap so that you can do those things? So that income and expenses are really important because that's how you do all the other things. And then if you're at the point where, okay, I have some money, now I need to know what to do with it. It's like, okay, so are you in debt? Create a debt payoff plan. How long can it take you if you want to aggressively pay it off? And then if you want to invest more, I always like, again, to start with the basics. I'm boring when it comes to investing. If you have a company 401k and you're already investing in it, even if it's not a lot, you are an investor. It doesn't have to look like flashy, like you don't have to be like a day trader. You don't have to like invest in one stock. Like you can do like boring, like index funds or target date funds. And I know some of those terms may be new to people, but really like looking at your current opportunity to invest, and you might already have it, and explore that and learn more about it. Call your HR company, see what your fees are. Just be knowledgeable about what you currently do. And if you're leaving money on the table, are you investing up enough to get the company match if they offer one? Can you squeeze a little bit more out every month to invest more in your 401k? Do you want to open up a Roth IRA, which is an after-tax investing account? So I think it's really just like, for me, when I first started to learn all these terms and I heard this, like it was a lot. But what I started to do is, because I immersed myself in that world, I would like write down and like start researching. Like I follow what I call breadcrumbs. Like, I click on the hyperlinks. You're reading like an article and it has a hyperlink and it's like, oh, do I click on that? It takes you like down the rabbit holes. But I think like all of this is just like hyperlinks that you then now research or do on your own to see, okay, what are the next steps? And then don't overwhelm yourself, because I know I just gave like a lot of tips just now and it can be overwhelming, but just okay, you can start with one thing. Like the awareness, if you're watching this and like vibing with us this long, then like you already like actually did a lot. And now the next step is, okay, what's one thing you want to work on? Maybe it's just looking at the inventory of things now. Like what do I like, the 4 things that I talked about, and then moving from there, the next best step. Right, that was a lot, but
no, beautifully said, and I think people are going to get a lot out of what you just said. But what I'm hearing is going back to the theme of mindset, but then also focus. Is like if things in your life aren't going to change automatically, or something isn't gonna, or somebody isn't gonna come along and like, okay, we're gonna fix your finances, and this will be that, like you have to focus on it. That's what I'm hearing, and looking to these different things that you're telling us about. So thank you for that. Yes. Appreciate it. I want to talk about your podcast, and I was going through the list of some of the guests that you've had on, and just from what I saw, it seems like you're really also trying to educate your audience on opportunities out there, mindsets that are out there, and leveraging the expertise of other people. And I think that's like very, very, very powerful. So I just want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the podcast and let us know a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So the Journey to Launch podcast, that's the name of it. You can listen to it wherever podcasts are listened to, Apple Podcasts. I do have a YouTube channel. I don't have fancy videos like you, Winthrop, but maybe one day I'll get there. But I think ultimately I learned so much from hearing other people's stories, like just everyday people. And so I wanted to have a platform where I could bring on, just a a diversity of guests. So experts, whether they're like teaching you about HSAs, like high yield savings accounts, there's different like terms, index funds, right? Like come talk to my audience and explain this in this way so we can learn together. Or just people who were just doing great things with their money from different starting points. So paying off debt, quitting their jobs, traveling the world. So it's like a mix of like having expert guests, but then also like everyday, what I call journeyers, sharing their story, who want to also share what they've done to help other people. And then like I have solo episodes that talk about my journey. And, you know, from the very beginning, I remember one of the episodes was literally when I quit my job and sharing that on the podcast. And so for people who have been listening from the beginning, they've definitely, because it's been around since 2017, we have over 400 episodes. Like you kind of hear like the transition or even like how ambitious I was in the beginning of the podcast, and kind of like more of my episodes now are about taking it easy and what that looks like in my life now. So there is a great mix of topics and just like perspectives that anyone can learn from.
Okay. And of course, we want people to subscribe to your podcast and listen to it. But is there a podcast that is like the most popular, or is there one that you'd like to steer people to check out because you'll get a lot out of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
400 is a lot, I know.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I did, depending on when this comes out, I did a episode a few weeks ago, just going over the basics of the financial independence movement and breaking down kind of like the stages that I talk about and the guac levels, just to orient people. Like if it was their first time listening, what does this all mean? Like what is financial independence? I think that's like a great starting point. But I would say some of the interviews that people really enjoy, I have J.L. Collins wrote the book, The Simple Path to Wealth, and he has a very popular blog. And I've had him on the podcast just to talk about index funds, because that what he talks about in the book. The simple path to wealth is not like you can do all the fancy things, but like just like set yourself up like the simple way first and then do the rest. And so we talk about index funds and what they are and how to get started, and like explains that. And I think people really enjoy those episodes. But, you know, I like to tell people I have such an eclectic range of topics that you can literally like kind of scroll through and look at the episode titles and see something that hopefully interests you and click on it. I love talking to teachers and like people who not necessarily like make, you know, a ton of money. They, you know, they're doing well, but what they've been doing or what they've done to be able to quit their job or have $1 million in their retirement account so that it can inspire someone who may be starting out to do the same.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for that. We'll make sure we have it linked below.
All those things.
Yeah. Also want to talk about your book.
Yes.
And so before we get into it, the name of the book is Your Journey to Financial Freedom, and a step-by-step guide to achieving wealth and happiness. Talk to me about the happiness part. Like, why was that important to you to put in the subtitle?
Because I think that you can be wealthy, you can reach financial independence and still not be happy. I think money helps a bit with that, like a certain level of satisfaction. But I think at some point that it doesn't measure or impact like your true happiness. And I think the biggest thing about this journey is that so much of it is you're going to measure based on what you have externally. And it's hard not to, because again, what's one of the things I just told everyone to do? Look at the income, expenses, like those are external things. But I think like the happiness part that comes from the things that don't cost money, the things that you can do now, no matter what level you're starting at. Like, I don't want people to have to wait, just like I didn't want to wait till retirement, like when I was 65 to enjoy my life, or wait 7 years from that starting point for financial independence to enjoy my life. I think that the happiness can be achieved in the moment, and however that looks for you is going to be different. But I think that the happiness is possible without wealth. And that tapping into that makes your journey much more doable, because you don't want to get to that point and think that that's when you're going to be happy, and you keep delaying the gratification, delaying your happiness, and you realize that's not it either. And so how do you bring that happiness to your journey today, right now, without all the money in the world, and just enjoy your life? And so that was big for me to talk about in the book and to help show others how to do it.
Awesome. I love it. And where can people pick this up?
So you can go to yourjourneytofinancialfreedom.com. Like that's the book website, and see where to get it. But you can get it on Amazon. You get it hopefully in the local airport or airports. You can get it at bookshop.org to support your local bookstores, Target, basically everywhere.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And as we're wrapping up here, I just want to ask some, not necessarily rapid fire questions, but just you don't have to you don't have to answer them quickly, but you can take your time. So what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about personal finance?
Biggest misconception. One of the misconceptions would be,
and this could be around, it could be around personal finance. It could be around just money in general. I'll give you a quick example.
Yeah.
So when I was, and this is kind of how like I realized like I felt like I've been duped in with the public education system. So like I remember my junior year of college, I took my first ever finance class. And then I remember the first day of this class, and I was just like, oh my God, this is how white people stay rich. And because like I didn't know anything about stocks. I didn't know anything about investing. And I was never a good math person. I just wasn't. But I fell in love with finance and numbers, and I decided to get my degree in finance. And so I felt at like in being enlightened, if you will, at that time, I felt that it just showed me that there is like so much knowledge and so much of the world I just don't know about. And I wasn't exposed to. And I was just like, wow, this is so interesting to me. And I just kind of just went so deep into it. And it also made me realize like I just got a lot to learn and a lot to read kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that brings up probably a big misconception is that you have to be good at math or super smart to be successful or to have money or be able to manage your money. I think the system is set up that way. So you think you need more things than you do. And I just think of money, it's like as much as I talk about money, like I don't really care about, like, money is made up. They literally print
that's
money,
true.
right? And you think about like interest rates, right? Like the fact that like someone like had the same loan can have the same loan amount, but because of the interest rate pays so much more, and how the interest rates are determined. It's just like all these things, right? Like I just think money is just a tool. It's important. So I'm not diminishing how important it is, but to not be intimidated by it, like not to let like your insecurities about maybe what you don't know let you feel like you don't deserve or you can't do something more than what you're doing if that's what you desire. And so I just think the misconception is that you have to like be brilliant, you have to look a certain way and be a certain kind of person or talk a certain way. And I'm just like, no, actually, like, I just feel like based on my just journey, and again, I don't want to like be one of those people like, oh, like everyone can do it if I can do it. It's more like, I just know based on how far I've gotten in life without being perfect, with still making mistakes, still learning, is that like, it's possible. There are people who are not as smart, if we want to measure it that way, but just go for it and get further. And so I just feel like you don't need to like be great at math to be successful. You don't have to look a certain way. I know some of that helps, but like it honestly, like most what people need to do, it's within, and harnessing that, like that's where it starts.
Right. I love that. And what does success mean to you? What does it mean to be successful from your perspective when you hear that word?
I think to be successful for me goes back to having options and not feeling like I have to do something. It's like I want to do it. And so that ability to control my time or have more control than I did years ago, you know, because at the end of the day, I still need to do certain things, right? Like there's still some obligations and things I need to do, but that is success. is that control, the options to do something different, to choose something different, which is what I want like most people to like experience.
No, that's huge. I totally agree. Like
Yeah.
just having that freedom with options. I love
Yeah.
that. And last question,
Mhm.
what advice would you give to 20-year-old Jamila if you could go back?
I would have said to max out. Well, I didn't graduate college yet, so I guess that would have been too early. Um, but I don't know the advice. I guess so. Forgetting about like investing, I would say was just to things are going to work out. They always have, even in your short 20 years that you've lived, and they will continue to. So like just have faith and do the right thing to know that things are going to work in your favor as long as you're like stepping up and ready for the challenge or the opportunity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And where can people find you? Where can people find out more about what you're doing? Your podcast, I think you're doing such an immense, great service to the world and to our community. And I've learned so much here today. And I'm sure many, many people out there want to continue to follow you and learn from you and, of course, support you as well.
Yeah. So you can go to journeytolaunch.com. That's like the hub for all things Journey to Launch. The podcast is called Journey to Launch, which you can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the places. And then I'm on social media at Journey to Launch. That's TO Launch. And then also at Jamila Souffrant. And then for the book, you can go to yourjourneytofinancialfreedom.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Jamila. Really appreciate this. This was amazing. So
Yay.
awesome. So awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hopefully we could do something again someday.
Yeah.